All right, welcome back to the Health Revival Show. We have another interview for you today that we are very excited about. Someone that I think we are probably going to be friends with moving forward. We have Tania today with us. She is on Instagram and TikTok and all of the places as Tania the Herbalist. But we are going to talk about taking your power back as a woman today, which, I mean, we are all about. I love this conversation already. Let's go ahead and dive in. And why don't you tell our listeners how you got into this space, how you got into this work? Give a little bit of a background on your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My story, to be honest with you, I didn't even know herbalism was a thing. I saw my mom on her deathbed. That's what happened. She was on too many pharmaceuticals, she was on narcotics, and I get you're talking about like the power of women. I get that drive from her. The ambition, the drive, the life, I get that from her. So to see that person on their deathbed, I hit a rock bottom point. And I took time off work and I just said, I need to just figure me out. I was suffering with chronic anxiety, insomnia, all of the stuff at that time. And I don't know if it's because I meditated for the first time or being in nature or all of it combined, but it's like I had this aha moment that I was like, there must be something natural that I can do for her because obviously the pills aren't working. And I went and I bought my very first book on medicinal herb and pen to paper. And I just started studying everything I can about the nervous system because that's what she suffered from, the neurofibromatosis. And she became my guinea pig. She became my guinea pig. She got off of her narcotics after being on it for a decade. And doctors were like, there's no way. Let's take a urine sample, all of this stuff. And she did. And she like reclaimed her life back and she got off of them. And she's still here and with us now. And she's laughing and talking and all this stuff again. And then I realized and learned that herbalism was a thing. So I was like, I need to learn more about this. And now I need to teach that to other people because I had no idea about the power behind plant medicine. And so that's kind of how Tanya the herbalist was born.
I love that. And I think like so many people in the functional medicine space or holistic space, whatever you want to call it, we have had these transformative, experiences, whether it was you or, a family member that you were caring for and saving them. And it just speaks to the passion behind what you do and knowing that this is your truth, right? So you turn kind of that test into a testimony. So I would love, I know you talk a lot about, staying in your own power and not giving your power away. And how we also have to regulate when we're building, regulate our nervous system when we're building a 7-figure business, an 8-figure business, right? We're hiring teams and we're going out there with a mission to change the world, which is what Becca and I are, doing as well. And we know the day-to-day grind can really wear us down if we let it, right? Physically, mentally, and emotionally. So you've built an amazing brand. I would love to hear, as you kind of went through this process of learning herbs and maybe leaving corporate America and quitting your job and building your own brand, how did you go from just like being, or how do you stay out of just this survival mode, this fight flight or freeze state, into being really a creative person that can also have a good balance with your own health?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think that, of course, like anyone else, when I first started this, I was in survival mode. I was working a corporate job for almost 4 years while I was building my business. I had a 7-month old while I'm working full time, building the business, full time nursing at home, like trying to juggle it all. And I just realized it's not sustainable. And so I first tried to figure out how can I build my business in the online space where I'm not exchanging time for money because I'm really passionate about there's a way that you can build a lifestyle where you're not just exchanging time for money, especially in the wellness world where it's like one-on-ones and all the stuff. But I think my aha moment came where it was at what point were we taught that you had to exchange one for the other? That I had to like give up motherhood or homeschooling or being at home with my child for my purpose and my passion, or to give up my health because I was so busy with the kids. And I realized that no, I can have it all. And how am I going to create that alignment, that balance to be able to juggle it all? And so I find that structure in this dynamic is actually very healthy, right? I find in the wellness space, a lot of people are kind of like, just go with the flow. And I was like, yeah, the flow works, but structure makes it realistic and actually gives you that. I feel like I'm finding that balance. And so when I created structure around how can I spend time with my kids and block those times off where it's quality over quantity, because we can sit there and spend all day with our kids, but thinking about everything else, And so I started to realize, okay, date nights with my husband are a priority. When are we going to have our date nights? Spending quality time with my kids, where I block it off on my calendar, like physically in my calendar. I block it off. Notifications are off. No one's bothering me, even if my business is burning to the ground, kind of thing. And same with the health. I book in my Pilates. I do what I got to do because every single one of them, I'm very passionate about like the wheel of life. And a lot of people, when you think about those 8 sectors of the wheel of life, they focus on maybe 2 or 3 and they forget about the other 5, not realizing that if you're not nourishing those 5, they bleed into everything else that you're creating. So you create the exhaustion, you create the feeling stuck, the confusion, and all of the stuff. Um, and so when I started to pay attention on all of those parts and said, how can I give attention to each one of them, even if it's 10 minutes a day, because people tend to think it has to be hours, I just felt like everything just flowed better. I had more energy all of a sudden because I wasn't sacrificing one over the other. And that made me realize that more women need to figure out how to do that. And it's not making it harder, it's actually easier because when you do something like an energy audit, where it's like, where do I spend a lot of times in my day on the most useless things that are not actually feeding me, but it's just more autopilot? You start realizing that you do have pockets of time and energy to spend on the things that you love that bring you that, I'm excited about life.
Yeah. Just for those of you listening, I mean, for us in the space, we know a little bit about the wheel of life, but just kind of breaking this down, we think about our self development, our personal growth, our career, family and friends, physical environment, finances, fun and recreation, health, and romance. I think, for many women, you hear those and you're like, how could I manage it all? How could I have what I desire in all of those categories? Because I think, like you said, we're so conditioned to say, okay, well, if I like this work life balance thing doesn't exist, right? So if I want to excel in my career and make more money, then that means less fun and recreation. And there's one person in my life who I look up to, and I've seen her do a phenomenal job of both, and it's really inspiring, right? But then also not forgetting about the rest of this. Like you said, my health doesn't have to suffer. So dive a little bit more into that in terms of, I know you talk a little bit about sovereignty and things like that, but when you're managing these things and you feel like, you said, okay, I started with 10 minutes a day, how do you coach women through being able to have it all, but also get to their goals in the way that they would desire and not feel like, okay, if I do, you know, less than I want to in certain categories, it's going to take me twice as long. How do you coach those things?
Well, I think we have to break free first from like the time scarcity. I feel like a lot of us who grew up in that, when you hear scarcity, you automatically assume money, but we've been programmed the same way when it comes to time scarcity, right? We can't believe we're running on, like, we don't have all day. Like from such a young child, you're like, I don't have a lot of time. So you feel like the days are flying by. But what I typically start with is, like I mentioned, the energy audit. We do the same thing with the time audit. Just for 24 to 48 hours, track what you're doing in a day, track where your time is going, where it's spent. And then how can I change some of those priorities to things that are actually moving me forward? So, for example, one of the things that I have the students do is, there's 2 things that we do. There's one that's called the 10-year rule. So it's like, just envision that that you've got 10 years of life left. And it's meant to be in a powerful way, not like a downer thing. And just say, what would I do different in my day? How would I, if I knew I had 10 days, what would I do that's different? And then the second thing is, okay, how can I put 18 minutes a day into that? Because 18 minutes a day is 100 hours a year. That's a lot of time. And what happens is, a lot of times we think that we have to put an hour to 2 hours into something in a day. And if you don't find that time block, you're like, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it when I have more time. But more time never shows up. You make more time. Life doesn't just slow down and give you more time. And so when I started to do the 18 minutes a day, what I saw happen is they felt less pressure because they know that they can find 18 minutes a day. And then what would happen is those 18 minutes would start to double and triple because they realize that, oh, those 18 minutes, oh my God, I just spent 40 minutes doing this instead of 18 minutes. And I feel so good. I'm moving it forward. And that's for anything. If I have 18 minutes a day to spend on my health, if I have 18 minutes a day to, work on my business, 18 minutes a day to meditate, whatever that priority is, what starts to happen is every single time you're adding that, that priority for you, for your health or your relationships or your work, you repeat that with the next step. Okay, where's the next place that I need to include for 18 minutes into my day? And it continues and starts to compound. And before you know it, you're kind of finding that balance into all of the things.
What did you find is the most common thing that women that you work with seem to struggle with in terms of what was that 18 minutes you usually spent doing?
Scrolling mindlessly on social media.
Yeah.
But the second thing is the OCD of cleaning their home. So it's funny because I saw both of them. In the the working moms and the working women, social media and mindlessly before you know it. And some people are like, I don't spend that much time. Cool. You can check out your tracker on your phone that will literally tell you how much you're spending. And before you know it, 40 minutes have passed and you're just mindlessly scrolling. Or the stay at home mom that maybe is not in a business right now, but still feels the same way. It's it's I have to clean. Well, I got to do the dishes. I have to do this. I have to do that. Why? Because then there's that internal guilt of like, this is my role. This is what I identified. I have to do this because if not, I'm not fulfilling my role. And that's a whole other conversation of the guilt. But there's always time that we're seeing that's being spent on some of the most. It's not like it's useless to have a perfectly clean home, but a lot of the times it's like it's okay if the dishes sit there for another few hours.
Yeah. I tell my husband that all the time. I have other priorities. I'm like, I'd rather spend time with my kids, and after they go to bed, I'll do the dishes. Um, so, in terms of the balance of all of this, I know these kind of like little time blocks throughout the day, but for you in particular, what did you find helped the most with kind of the golden question that I feel like every female has of balancing your job and your business that you're trying to grow, balancing being a mom and being present, especially in those early years, which I think is probably some of the hardest, right? Because they're so dependent on you and they're so in need of you.
Yes.
And then, your relationship and how was that, date nights, yes, and time blocking of the day. But I feel like even when you do that, sometimes you still start to wear this like mental burden of I'm dropping the ball somewhere at all
Yeah.
times. Right.
Yeah.
So what did you find helpful for yourself in that?
So, just to kind of paint a little bit of a picture, because I remember, like, you're bringing me back to sitting on my front porch where I was working the corporate job and the only time I was actually working on my business was when my son was finally asleep at night. So it's like he's in bed at 8 o'clock, like, this is my time to work. And when it comes to relationship, I think it's important in terms of intimacy and romance. It's not like there's date night necessarily every single week in grind mode. Like when you're really in the building mode, it's knowing that this is just short term and that's okay. But the way that I found worked is it's future pacing. The future pacing is what kept me going. If you're stuck in your current circumstances, you don't have the excitement of what you're creating. So even if I was tired, even if I was exhausted, there was days that I would rest. But what would keep me motivated to just do the work is I would always picture where I'm going. What is that goal that I'm working towards? That would excite me so much that I'm like, okay, I got to do the work. I got to find the time. Oh, I'm tired. That's fine. I'm going to do 18 minutes. And if I could just do 18 minutes, at least I'm going to sleep feeling productive. And I'm not going to let that compounding of I should have done it yesterday. And now it's been a week. Now it's been a month. Now it's been a year. And then same thing, that 18 minutes would turn in sometimes to 2 hours. And I was like, oh my God, I feel so freaking good right now. So it's really just about that future pacing and setting the goals. Cause I find a lot of people don't set goals. And even if it's small micro goals, that would keep me so excited that I would bring me back to my current circumstance and say, what am I going to do? Because that's where I'm going. That's where I need to go. If I just got stuck in my current circumstances, I'm going to make excuses and I'm going to stay exactly where I am.
Can you talk a little bit about that future pacing in terms of the vision? So, did you have a vision? I think we can talk about, faith here
Yes.
as well. So, knowing that God had a greater purpose for you than just staying in a corporate job. But I think many women, and I myself sometimes struggle with this as well, to understand like that 5-year plan, right? What's the vision? I'm going to have X, Y, and Z and like know all the details because I'm definitely more detail oriented with things. And so for the woman out there who's like, I know I want to do this, but I don't know what it looks like. I don't even know how to, you know, wrap my head around it in a way that would make me so passionate about like what you're saying, spending 18 minutes every day. Cause like my first thought is that if someone says I can't do that, as a coach, I would probably say, then maybe this isn't the thing that you're truly in alignment with and called to do or passionate to do. Like you don't want it bad enough, essentially, if we can't find those
Right.
18 minutes. Because, like you said, many women struggle with, either scrolling or shopping or just doing little things that don't need to get done. So talk a little bit about that in terms of how you craft that vision. And was meditation the thing that helped you start to see that vision, or did you just kind of always know
Yeah.
this is what I want to do?
So honestly, maybe this is a little bit unconventional, but I don't like the whole 5-year plan and stuff like that, is because what happens is when I first started this journey, it gets so overwhelming when you think too far ahead that you're like, I'm never going to get all of these steps done. And you're almost going to convince yourself otherwise. What I found worked for me is like, okay, what's my first goal? My first goal is I want to be able to leave corporate. I don't know what the heck's going to happen after that, but I want to leave corporate. What do I need to do to leave corporate? So I'm like, okay, if I start a business, okay, I'm an herbalist. I'm going to start with the teas and the tinctures and all of the stuff. And I find that what happens is God is so incredibly amazing that when you just take that first step, he starts to show you the next step and the next step. And that's also why I don't believe in the whole 5-year plan, is because you're going to sit here and exhaust so much energy into that. But God has a totally different plan. You just got to take that step forward and let him show you that next step, which is how, for me, I said, I just want to leave. My goal was I'm going to leave corporate. I don't know how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to leave the how to him, but I'm going to take that inspired action every single day to know that I'm putting it into the universe. I'm creating that energy that is going to happen. I just don't know how. And so I started with the physical realm, and that grew, but it got to a point where I started cringing when I would get big orders because it just wasn't profitable. I'm like, I'm never going to leave corporate. So then that was my next aha moment, when I was like, how can I still share this information without exchanging time for money? Okay, let me share it in a digital product. So that's how it was first born. I could share this knowledge in the digital product without creating the products. And then that started. And then the next step showed me, and the next step, and the next step, until I was like, holy crap, I'm making enough money, if not more, than my corporate role, even though it took me 4 years to actually leave. But then I was also still scared to leave. And then that's all of that because of that industrial revolution mindset of the working class and all of this stuff. And this is what safe means, until I was forced into quitting my job because we were traveling. And they're like, no, you're coming back on Monday or you're gone. And I said, hey, God, I'm trusting you. This is what I got to do. And I quit. And I would have never known how each step was evolving. I just knew my first thing was I want to leave the corporate. And then from there, it's like I left the corporate and I said, okay, I'm enjoying this. What's my next step? And then that next step showed to me. The next step showed to me. So I can't even sit here and say it's just meditation. It's like you get signs that you have to lean into and trust your intuition that God, it's like that leap of faith, just trusting in the unknown, and each step evolved. Like where I am right now, each step just, as long as I'm taking that first step, the next step shows up for me. So I can't even sit here and say, I know what's going to happen in 5 years, because 5 years ago, my vision of 5 years would have never been here.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear you say that. I
Yeah.
feel the same way.
No, I agree. And I've had to remind myself every day in the morning. It's become like part of my quick morning routine, which I give myself 15 minutes for, because typically I wake up early to get work done before the day. And now my daughter, for whatever reason, has started waking up an hour earlier than she normally does. And she's awake. This morning she was awake before 6. And Liz deals with that all the time. But my children usually are good sleepers. And I'm like, Taylor, you sleep. But in my 15-minute morning routine, I ask myself constantly, what is God trying to show you? What is he trying to put in your life that you maybe aren't seeing right now because you're not looking? And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, is they're so caught up in their day to day, and they're so caught up in the to-dos that they have every day, that they don't actually see the signs that are there. And they don't, or they're overthinking them, or they're reading too much into them, or, whatever it might be. And so just start looking, because I think a lot of times they're there, they've been there. You are just either maybe closed off to seeing them, or being welcoming to them, or open to them. And I love that, you use faith as part of this journey for yourself. And it's, in my opinion, it has to be. It like, there's no, you cannot
100%.
be an entrepreneur. You cannot be in this world without having some level of faith and belief that the next step you take isn't going to take you off a ledge into a deep abyss, right? It's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe that it is the right step for me, and I'm just going to take it because it seems like, in my gut, in my heart, in my mind, it's the right thing to do. So what are some of, with your clients, obviously the time block being a big mental block. Is there anything else that you see commonly with women as like something that's continuing to hold them back?
Um, I would say that just the habit of procrastination. So what happens is a lot of times we keep telling ourselves, I know I need to get to that. I'll get to that sooner. I'll get to that later. And what's crazy is every time you move the goalpost, every time you delay, every time you put your desires on hold, it becomes psychologically harder to start. And there are studies that actually show that the longer you postpone something, the more resistance your body builds around it. Your subconscious literally starts attaching discomfort to the very thing that you're avoiding doing, even though you want to. So that becomes a form of self-protection, which is like a perpetual waiting game, right? And but with you, what I typically do is I ask them, okay, so what's later? When the health is spotless? When the kids are magically self-sufficient and no longer need you every 30 seconds? Because that moment never happens, right? So we stay in a loop of someday that never comes. And then the second thing I see often is um, energy scarcity mindset, right? We treat energy like it's a limited currency when we're barely scraping it together. But energy isn't just about rest, it's about alignment. And it expands when you're doing what lights you up. It's like you find more energy, and it contracts though when you're forcing yourself through a life that doesn't feel like yours anymore. You're just running on autopilot, which becomes like clockwork conditioning, right? And we're taught to treat like the time like it's linear when you're aligned, like time, it just feels different. And so it's not about hustling harder or anything. It's about finding that alignment. So I find that the biggest thing is that procrastination, waiting for that right time, waiting till I have more energy, all of that. But that actually compounds. The longer you wait, the harder it ever is to actually get started. And until you just start, it's like everything just flows easier, which is crazy to me to think that some people just don't get started out of that fear of, whatever the fear is, I'm not going to have time. The fear of disappointment in themselves, right? But if I get started now and I'm not able to put the time, now I've just disappointed myself because I wasn't able to push through. So then what they do is they get caught up in the illusion of busyness. The illusion of busyness is as long as I'm staying occupied in the day, I'm justified in my excuse for not getting started in the first place, which is totally just an illusion.
Yeah. What would you say to the woman who's got a vision and she knows like it's in her belly, it's there, God's given it to her, but she's just delaying because she's doubting, like you said, or she's afraid? I think sometimes we don't talk enough about the fear of success. Because it's like easy to talk about the feel of failure, right? Like, what if, you know, I don't succeed, or what if it doesn't go the way that I plan, or whatever. But also, what if you do succeed? What happens then? Your whole life changes. So I'm just curious what you would say to that person who they know they have this vision in their heart, in their gut, but they're just sitting in doubt.
I think that it has a lot to do with confidence, but not confidence in like the theoretical type. Confidence in the sense of you don't actually build confidence until you're doing something. It doesn't just come to you. People aren't just born with it. It's it comes from, I don't even think it's the fear of success. They think it's the fear of success because it's like, am I going to be able to sustain it? Because they lack the confidence in themselves that they're actually capable of sustaining it, right? But a lot of the times we're downplaying our power, right? It's like it shows up when you don't do the thing. It shows up when you're shrinking in the rooms, when you're probably the most experienced one with the best story to share. It shows up when you're like, oh, I'm just a mom. I'm just starting. Oh, I'm not ready yet. But it doesn't come from doing more. It comes from just remembering who you are and just doing it, right? We've been conditioned, I believe, especially as women, to chase confidence through external achievement, to believe that once we get there, then we're going to feel confident. Once we lose the weight, once we get the degree, once we hit the goal, once we're validated by someone else, then we'll finally feel enough, which is performance based worth, right? And that's dangerous because when you think about the schooling system and the working system and all of the stuff is always performance based. When you get the good grades, all of that, that's external validation. But instead of just saying, I am enough, I have everything. And the only way to truly build confidence is by doing the uncomfortable thing anyway, when you're not ready, trembling hands, shaky voice, I feel like I'm going to vomit kind of feeling, and you show up. That builds your confidence faster than anything else.
Yeah, because you're proving to yourself that you can do things, do hard
Absolutely.
things. But you'll never prove that to yourself if you're not showing up and taking the action, right? And doing the hard things. So I love that. And I would love to talk a little bit just more about faith and how that has crafted you as a coach, a leader, a mom, an entrepreneur. We talk a lot about, higher powers. I'm a Christian and I believe in God, right? And so I think both of us are very open about that. But, you talk about, putting things out there into the universe as well. How has that transformed your business and the way you run your business?
How it transformed my life. I remember when I was in my late 20s, I was in another toxic relationship because I grew up watching abuse in my household. So I thought it was normal. I was in a toxic relationship. I was at a job that I hated with my life that paid me about 36,000, working like 11 to 8 p.m. And I had chronic stress induced hives for 6 months from head to toe. I didn't know it was stress induced hives after 6 months of doing testing and realizing what it was. And I was living in a house that I absolutely hated with my friend, but I didn't want to live at home with my parents and all of this stuff. And it was the most miserable time. And clearly my body was saying it by having the stress induced hives. And I remember just looking and I'm like, this is not what I expected to be in my late 20s right now. Like, I hate my job. I hate where I live. I hate my relationship. Like, this is awful. And I just remember looking up at God and I said, like, is this what you planned for me? Like, there's no way. And though I always had faith, it hits different when I decided to surrender to God, to truly see his power. And I woke up one morning and I cried to him and I cried and I cried. I said, please help me. My plan is not working. Whatever I'm doing and trying to control everything myself is not working. I'm surrendering to you. Tell me what to do. Just give me the sign and I will do whatever. And I woke up the very next morning and I ended the relationship that I was in. And 24 hours after that, I went and I quit my job. I didn't even have any money. I had debt like you wouldn't believe. And the same day that I quit my job, I went to my best friend's house. I packed up all of my stuff into my two-door coupe and I moved back into my parents' house. And so here I am in my late 20s, broke, no job, single, back at my parents' house. So I felt like a complete failure. And I just remember looking up and I said, I think this is what you want me to do. So just show me what to do from here. And you feel like a complete failure, but I felt that peace. And what's crazy is what happened from this moment forward is within 1 month, I got a job at a company that is one of the companies that forever changed my life. Within 3 months, I made enough money at that company. That company never hit quarterly bonuses because their retention was so awful. Yet somehow they hit a quarterly bonus that paid me within the first 3 months just enough to pay for a down payment for a home. And then I got with my now husband at my little brother's wedding, all within a matter of months. And that was literally God's way of saying, hey, if you trust me, I will not only give you what you want, I will give it even better at a faster rate than you ever thought imaginable. And my whole life completely shifted in a matter of months. And from that moment forward, I said, I'm always going to surrender and trust in you because I never would have imagined that outcome to be like it is. But so many people are afraid to take that leap and to just trust him, being like, everything I could ever imagine is even better in his control.
The control, the letting go of the
It's
control.
the
It's
letting
the
go.
control.
It's always, you know, and I think that is with food, with alcohol, with all of the vices that we live with. It's just, I don't like feeling this uncertainty. So we go to what makes us feel certain things that make us feel safe, even if they aren't healthy, right? It's always that, like the toxic relationship. It's what you know.
That's what
What you
what's safe
don't
and
know
secure.
is what can save you and what can flourish you, but it's unknown and it's scary. And I think as you obviously work with clients and help people kind of make these changes, the value of having that person that's walked that path, or the mentor or the coach, or even just someone that you can confide in. I being a mother is such a amazing, rewarding experience, but it's also a really lonely, challenging, scary experience. It's like I am the one responsible for this child's life. Like, yes, my husband too. But, as a mother, you feel like you take on that burden.
100%.
Um, so when you have a female or a client or someone that comes to you asking for this help, like, where do you start with them? Is it the time audit? Is it, hearing kind of what they're going through and what they seem to be in the most need of, like, where do you start with the helping? Is it the 18 minutes? What's your
That's
first
a
step?
great question. So I typically would start with the wheel of life, because what happens is people come to me and they say, this is what I want help with, but I could see what they need help with. And it's not always the same thing. So real life example that typically comes up often is someone comes and they said, I need more money. I need the financial help. I'm struggling. I want to build something or whatever it is. And they're like, I've been trying this for years. This is not working. I'm struggling to keep afloat. I've got my kids. I've got all of this stuff. Like, how do you do it? And when you go through the wheel of life, it's like personal development and intimacy and romance is like the bottom of it. And it's crazy because, and then finances. So it's usually those three: personal development, or, that recreation, fun, happiness, intimacy, and finances. So the first thing is, like, I actually get them to, I find out a little bit about their relationship status, in a sense of, you might not think it's a priority to have date night with your partner, but by not doing that, you are never going to be able to move financially or your business forward, because that is going to bleed in the most into that. That energy that you carry with you there is going to bleed in. But that also bleeds into your children, that example, that guilt, all of the stuff into your kids. And then on financial part, so it really depends on if it's like a 1, 2, 3, 4. The financial is, I get them to do a full budget audit. You know how many people are scared to look at how much money they spend a month? That will tell you more than anything. Right.
Mm.
And it's crazy. And I'm like, you're doing a budget audit and you're going to send it to me. And they're kind of like, and I'm like, no, awareness is necessary. And then you start seeing all of the stuff that you don't even care to spend on, or that's not necessary to spend, all of this stuff. And I said, perfect. This is how much money you actually have extra a month. And which one of them are not moving the needle forward to where you want. That awareness is so powerful, and they're so minute, but it's huge. And so it really kind of depends on those aspects of what's the lowest on your wheel of life, because they're coming in and saying, hey, I want to make a ton of more money, but I don't want to look at the money that I'm actually spending, because there's so much abundance. But abundance is not going to come to you until you're aware of where you're just throwing money away in terms of that scarcity mindset.
And it's always the awareness. Like,
100% of the
so many
awareness.
people walk around with zero awareness of, they're unhappy, but they're not willing to take a hard look. And a lot of times you need someone not close to you in your life to help you do that. I having someone I talked to yesterday, they were like, well, why would you do like a more in-depth program versus doing things on your own? And I was like, I can't give the mental energy anymore to like try and decide what to eat and how to exercise and all. Like, I know how I help women do it. I've been helping women do it for years, but the mental energy that it takes, and also as a female, we tend to be very emotional creatures and we let things sway us very easily sometimes. And so if I have a day where I feel puffy or inflamed or not happy in my body, you better believe I'm like, well, I'm just going to fast. I'm just going to do some water fasting. I mean, but like that might not be what my body needs. And my coach can tell me
Right.
that and pull me back down to earth and be like, hey, you're about to get your period again. You do this every month, And so like it is, it, it is so hard sometimes to develop that self awareness when you are stuck in it. And
100%.
this, the circle of life and this awareness ability to visit each one of these, I think is something that every female should be doing.
When
Um,
you have that awareness, once you have awareness, you can't ignore it. It's like something in you, it's going to be eating away at your brain until something changes, because you're like, no, now I'm really aware of it. And it's crazy.
and it's sometimes it's our, it's looking at our faults, it's looking at things that we maybe aren't great at yet. And it's not always the fun part of growth, is being like, okay, maybe I've ignored this, or maybe I haven't really truly faced this. And it can feel like a shameful, guilty type feeling. And it keeps a lot of women from doing that, whereas I think we just put a lot of emotion and a lot of feelings towards things like that. Whereas a lot of times our counterparts are like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll change that. Or they just completely neglect it. And, it's a black and white thing. But for me, I know personally, I take it personally. Like I'm like, shoot, now I feel like a failure now that I've faced this. And instead of that feeling, it's okay, this allows for growth. This allows for me getting to the place that I want to get to. And that is why both of us are like, self development is probably the number one thing I focus on a daily, right up there with my relationship. And what you said is what a lot of women struggle with. I think it's something that Liz and I have really made an effort towards making our priorities. It's like the romance piece, the self development piece. Maybe I still need some work on the financial piece. I do still need some work on the financial piece, but you know, no one's perfect.
The only reason I do this is because I majored in finance, ironically enough. So once I hit rock bottom, my car was going to get repossessed. At one point, I lived in my car with garbage bags, and my car was going to get repossessed, and I was waiting for a subsidy check. So, like, you got to hit rock bottom before I'm like, I'm never going to make a mistake with money. I'm going to know money like you wouldn't believe. Um, and that alone gives you so much empowerment because it's like, oh, I'm going to go and buy myself that new purse. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go invest that money. Right. Oh, I want to go and buy these new pair of pants. I'm like, no, mine are good until they have a hole in them. I'm going to go invest this money, or I'm going to. So you just start shifting and saying, how, instead of how can I spend, which is rich dad, poor dad mentality, right? It's like, how can I spend this money versus how can I invest this money? And then I start looking for money that I'm like, okay, where is it useless? Oh, we haven't watched Netflix in a month. Cool. We're canceling Netflix. We can watch YouTube. Oh, we're doing, do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but you're right, because it really comes down to a lot of women are so afraid of feeling the shame or the guilt that they'd rather avoid it, not realizing that they're building shame and guilt in another form. Right.
Yeah, they're
And it's
just
just kind of
transferring.
letting go of that.
Just transferring. I think in terms of, my husband and I have talked a lot about this over the years because he used to also own a business in person, and we were looking to expand. And we would have a lot of conversations about, there's some biblical aspects here where, it says God basically isn't going to expand your kingdom until you're taking care of the kingdom that he's given you. Right. And so, we've had that situation several times in our life. And it's like, okay, that's a gut check from God saying, like, hey, you're not doing the things that I've asked you to do with the things I've provided for you. Therefore, at this time, it's not that he's like withholding, but it is in a
We're not
way, right?
for it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I'm very thankful for that and those checks and balances. And then, like you were saying earlier, is like you can't see this grander vision. And I think that's because we don't know God's vision. And so it's that unknown, and it's the trusting and taking those leaps of faith and going through some of these really hard times and falling flat on your face and being at the mercy of God and saying,
Yes.
okay, I don't know what lesson is here, but I'm ready to learn it because there's no other option. So I would love to know from you. I mean, you've shared a lot of really challenging moments in your life. um, what would you say has been your greatest lessons from some of those failures or times that you felt like you were a failure?
I think that, I mean, there's so many lessons, but one that just intuitively stuck out when you said that is that fear of failure, and then avoiding that like the failure was so necessary in every way, shape, or form to build me to how I am now. So had I, like, before the situation, I'm like, I don't want that to ever happen, so I'm going to avoid it at all costs, not realizing that that's exactly what I need to get to that next level. And nobody gains strengths or knowledge and wisdom and all of that unless you failed, unless you go through the struggles and the challenges. Like, it's necessary. So now it's kind of like, I I'll enter into a new era. I'm like, cool, I wonder what the the challenge that's going to come up is going to be, because I know that I'm meant to reach to this point, and I know that there's things that I need to learn to get to this point. So what is God going to put me through? And I think that's the biggest thing, is we tend to keep ourselves safe to avoid that failure, because that failure will make us feel like there's shame and all of the stuff. But you need it. Like, you need to fail. And it's not necessarily that. I always say everything is a blessing or a lesson. And that lesson will turn into a blessing. So that's going to have to look at it. I'm like, oh, I'm in the season of a blessing. Beautiful. Enjoy it, because I'm going to head to a season of a lesson soon enough. That will turn into the blessing. So it's kind of just always going back and forth and embracing that.
And that's how you grow. If you
Exactly.
don't look at the lessons though and take that, then you stay stuck. And I think this is where many people get into this limiting belief mindset, right? I've tried before and I failed. And so therefore I can't, right? Or I wasn't special enough. There's something more, special about that person. And it's like, nah, at the end of the
God
day,
is preparing you.
yeah,
God is
you
preparing you
just,
to get to that next level.
yeah. So many good things there. I would love for you just to share, with our audience, like anything that you're working on, where they can find you, connect with you, what you offer in your program to help women who are looking to break through and level up in their life and break down some of these false limiting beliefs.
Yeah. So I literally, so for the last several years, ever since I had like my next aha moments, I've been helping um, women take their business online and create that financial freedom. And over the last several months, I was like, there's a missing piece. There's something that's missing. I did not go through all of the stories and the faith and the confidence and the relationships and all of that to teach business strategies. Yeah, I'm good at it. And so I spent months and months saying, I need to create a community where I'm helping women. And that means in their relationships, because I have like, I want to say that I've helped so many people in their relationships that I was like, man, I'm gifted with this. It's because I had to kiss so many frogs to find my prince. And what did I learn and all of this stuff. But then there's the confidence and how I rebuilt my relationship with my sister and my mom, and how I repaired my husband's relationship with his mom, who technically abandoned him. Like, just so much stuff that I'm like, there's no way I'm just meant to teach business. And so I had an aha moment and I said, no, I'm creating a community where I'm going to teach women to do this and we're going to empower each other. And I literally launched it a week ago and it's called She's in Power. And it's been amazing since. And it's a community for women to learn all things about, lifestyle and well-being, relationships and communication and connection, confidence, vision and legacy. So there is the business aspect, and it's like I'm there in that community saying you can have it all. You don't have to compromise one or the other, and this is how you can go through all of them. And I literally launched that about a week ago, so I'm super excited about that. It's called She's in Power, and it's right now it's $39 a month. And I know you're probably going to be like, "What?" I know I heard it for a long time, but I said I need to make it right now affordable for the mom that's either not working or not, but still to be able to have some kind of a support without charging the tens of thousands of dollars that I would typically charge.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that. I think so many people need connection, and as much as I love in person, we're actually hosting our first in person event this year, and doing a little bit more just in the community in person because we've been online for so long. There is definitely the need for a community like that because people don't always have the time to go or be able to be there on, for example, I'm in a women's group Wednesday nights at 7. It's like,
yeah.
okay, well, this week something happened, next week something happened, but at least you have a place to go. So I love that. And then yeah, we'll link out all of your things in the show notes as well. Instagram, Facebook, she's got a great social media channel, so make sure
Thank
that you're
you.
following her and connecting with her there. And then just to wrap this up, we always ask every guest on our podcast, if there was one thing that you could shout from the mountaintops for the world to hear, what would it be?
If you trust God, you can have the healthiest, happiest life that you probably never thought of. And on that note, I do want to say, because I love you guys and your show so much on the Health Revival Show, that I am going to be gifting a Power Pillar series. It's an audio series that I created. It's 3 audio series. It's super powerful. I actually only usually give it to my mastermind members that signed up, like work with me for a year. Um, so I'm so happy to gift that to all of the listeners. All they got to do is DM me CEO Health Revival on Instagram, and we'll send them that link for free.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're
This
very
has been
welcome.
great.
It's a pleasure.